The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sporty's webinar that's being presented tonight by Garmin on the G3X, your avionics for light sport and experimental aircraft. So glad you could join us. I'm your facilitator for the evening. My name's Eric Radke. We're delighted to have with us tonight Brian Hoopy from Garmin. Brian, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Eric, and thank you all for tuning in tonight, taking some time out of your busy day to listen to us talk about avionics. We're really excited to present this information. I'm just one of the members of the experimental team at Garmin. I primarily handle the sales aspect and show support and things like that. So feel free to follow up with me after the webinar if you have any additional questions, but I'm going to go ahead and dive right in and cover a lot of information, and then hopefully have some time left over for you to submit some questions to Eric, and we can do a little Q&A wrap up at the end.
Yeah, great. Brian, thanks so much. Very excited to have you here to talk about these emerging markets. Just before we get started, let me remind the audience of just a few housekeeping items. First and foremost, we are recording tonight's presentation, so if you do have to pause, step away, if you miss something that Brian talks about, you can always come back and view this as many times as you would like. This will be available in the Sporty's webinar archive at sportys.com/webinars. Also, as Brian just mentioned, you do have the capability via the GoToWebinar software platform to submit questions, and feel free to do so throughout, and then we'll set aside some time at the very end for Brian to answer those. So Brian, kind of as a segue to get us started, how about we kind of get a feel for where the audience is at and what type of aircraft they might be flying. I'm going to put a poll in the field to kind of ask about the type of aircraft that are being flown by the attendees that are on tonight. So we'll give that just a few seconds for people to respond. It's kind of the early results indicate almost nearly half are kind of either building an aircraft or planning to build. We have another 20%-ish that fall into that considering a light sport aircraft, and then another 20% kind of fall into that other category. So Brian, with that, I'm going to let you take it away.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, we're going to cover highlights of a lot of different areas of it, features and installation aspects. I'm going to go ahead and start clicking away on some slides here. Okay, so starting out, just want to cover a few new product introductions. So we had some exciting announcements at Oshkosh this year. The first one being this GPS 20A. It is a ADSB compliant GPS module, so it's small, light, remote mount box, and what that's going to do for you, we're leveraging certified technology here, so we needed to come up with something that would meet those TSO performance requirements for ADSB out compliance. That was the bar that the FAA had set for us, and so this was our response to that. This is ADSB out compliant when you pair it with a compatible antenna like the GA35 and one of our ADSB out transponders. The GTX 23ES is the most common with the G3X installation. It could be a GTX 330ES. The key here is it is a non-TSO'd box, so it's really applicable to the experimental light sport market. It does do what we call an ADSB plus out format and some other industry standard formats like the NMEA output. So that makes it so it can work with some third-party transponders and other devices as well as the Garmin product line. So if you had a 406 megahertz ELT, for example, this could be your GPS position source for that. And last but not least, it does connect to our CAN bus network on the G3X system. So what that's doing, it's taking a single GPS antenna, a single GPS receiver, and it's putting that information out on the CAN bus for all the displays to consume. So now you've got basically a redundant source of GPS to all the displays, and it's also your compliant GPS position source feeding the transponder. So a very nice solution there. And this is just a quick view of what's required for the installation on the wiring side. It's a remote mount box, real easy to find a place to stick that, but you're going to need a bidirectional connection to the transponder there at the top. That's this first one on here. I'm going to use my little pointer here since I'm used to using a laser pointer during most of my presentations. The second one being the NMEA output. next to that, you can see the CAN bus splice there, putting that GPS data out on the network. You're going to have a power and ground, of course, and then the GPS antenna. That's basically all you need to install this box. Okay, moving on. Next up, our GMC307. So this is a new dedicated autopilot controller, and what we did was really built upon the functions that we have already in our GMC305. The biggest difference there is it adds those dedicated knobs for heading and altitude bug adjustment. So otherwise, they're essentially the same device, same capabilities. You'll still have that there in the middle, that dedicated pitch wheel. It's a wheel for pitch, vertical speed, or airspeed adjustment, depending on which autopilot mode you're currently using. And we still have that dedicated level button, that blue button there in the center. So if you ever get an unusual attitude or you just want to be able to fly straight and level and get your bearings, you can always hit that for a quick access. And it's pretty easy upgrade from the GMC305. It is a little bit larger, so you're going to have a little bit bigger cutout in order to accommodate it. But we have what we call a pawl latch design, and if you can see on the picture here, we're basically showing the stages. As you start to crank down on this guy, this little wing right here pops out and allows it to clamp down on the panel. So instead of having to have screws or something holding it, this little thing pops out and just clamps onto the panel, can make for a really easy installation. And it also uses the same installation hardware, and the connector is identical, pin for pin compatible, so pretty straightforward to transition if you've already started provisioning for the GMC305. The third product we introduced is the GSU-25B. So what this is primarily for high performance aircraft, and it's the ADAHRS module, typically only going to be needed if you're flying over 300 knots indicated airspeed. And indicated airspeed is the key. I don't care if you're going to go over 300 knots true airspeed, just the indicated airspeed. So typically, this is going to be in more of our jet type installations, which we do have a fair number of those experimental jets out there flying around. So the majority of the market won't need this, but it is available now. And it does the ADAHRS air data and now brings an angle of attack port. So previously, the high performance ADAHRS we had, the GSU-73, didn't have that AOA port. So it brings a new feature for the higher performance. You can optionally install up to 3 of these for redundancy and for sensor comparisons that the system does automatically. Again, that's totally optional. Same with the standard GSU-25. Okay, moving on. Go through a quick system overview just to give you an idea of what the system architecture looks like. I am primarily focusing on the G3X Touch today, but this is basically the same for either a legacy or the G3X Touch system, since the connectors on all our displays are pin for pin compatible, so most of it's applicable to both systems. You will notice that the primary network here is that CAN bus network, so you can see it going around there, and you're going to notice the GTR 200 and the GTR 20, those are specifically designed for the experimental market comm radios. I'm going to talk more about those later. Of course, the displays, so you're going to get all the information in the system, access to all the displays that are installed. The ADAHRS module, the servos, those are all connected. The GEA24, that's going to do our interfaces for our engine and airframe sensors. And then a couple things I like to highlight are the redundant paths in the system. So for primary flight data like the GSU-25 is providing, we do have a secondary path for RS-232 data to get up to the display. So even if I snip the CAN bus wires, I'd still have that information. We feel like that's an important aspect when you're dealing with instrument flying, especially. You want to have those redundant paths in the system. Similarly, on the autopilot side, our autopilot controller has direct connection here, you'll notice, to the roll servo. So what that does for us, again, it's talking to the display and to the roll servo over RS-232. If the display goes offline for any reason, as long as the autopilot controller, those servos, and the GSU-25 are still online, you're still going to have some basic autopilot controls to keep the airplane straight and level. So that is a nice redundant mode, again, to get your bearings, help you control the aircraft in potentially an emergency scenario. And then the last thing I'll highlight here, the GAD29 data concentrator. So that's the ARINC 429 data going to and from are IFR navigators. So that'll be like the GTN series, a GNS 430, 530, something like that. Okay. So obviously, foremost in the system, you're going to see the big 10.6-inch G3X touch display, and we also have that 7-inch display option available. You're going to be able to mix and match those up to 4 screens in any given system, so it gives you a lot of flexibility depending on what kind of real estate you have. It was a clean sheet hardware and software design, and we were thinking about touchscreen early on. We had a lot of experience with our GTN series, with our touchscreen controllers used in the high-end aircraft installations. So we had a leg up, I guess you could say, for designing a user interface that takes advantage of that touchscreen technology. But it does keep some of those familiar knobs and buttons for the frequently used functions. And I'm going to go through some of those aspects here throughout the presentation. It is the highest resolution display I've seen on the market, that 10.6-inch display. Extremely sunlight readable, very clear to see, and it is an infrared touchscreen. So that's gonna do a couple things for you. It's gonna make it a very responsive touchscreen. You're gonna have more of an iPad type experience in terms of how responsive it is. But also it lets you use it with or without gloves. So that's a big advantage if you're flying in an extreme environment, whether it be extreme heat or extreme cold, where you might be wearing gloves. And the last thing, the touchscreen distortion, the biggest thing I can say is get in front of the display, push the buttons, turn the knobs, interface with the touchscreen. That's why we go to shows, is so customers can have a chance to play with the equipment and just see how high quality it is. That glass on there is a very high quality, thick piece of glass, so you're not going to get any kind of touchscreen distortion like you would on some touchscreen products, and also just the quality of the knobs and buttons that are used throughout. On the back side, you're going to notice it has a GPS receiver built in. So 3X display does have a VFR GPS built in. You can optionally get this SiriusXM receiver built in. So this right here is a hardware option. So you need to think about up front before you make your purchase. If you're ever going to get a SiriusXM subscription, or you just want it just in case, it's probably worth the money to get that built into the hardware up front instead of trying to just swap displays out down the road. This over here, the composite video input, that's another standard feature. So as long as you have a composite video signal that's compatible, common formats like NTSC are going to work for you. So we can do cool things like connect up to our action cameras. You can hardwire that in. We do have wireless technology built into these displays, which lets me wirelessly control those action cameras. And I'll show you what that looks like here in an example in the presentation. But even if you just wanted to hook up a DVD player, again, as long as it has a composite video output, you can wire up an entertainment system if you want, totally up to you. So we'll go through the other starring lineup here, essentially the core components of the system. And you'll notice the GSU-25 ADAHRS. So this is just the standard version of our GSU-25 Bravo that I introduced before. That, along with the GMU-22 and GTP-59, the outside air temperature probe, and the magnetometer down here, those are the core components that are going to come with any G3X kit that you purchase. You'll get a display plus these 3 key components. Very small, lightweight design. It does connect up to that CAN bus with that dedicated RS-232 connection available, like I mentioned before. It's going to interface with the magnetometer and the OAT probe. And you can get up to 3 of these installed, so now you've got the ability to have redundancy, number one, and it's also going to do a sensor cross-check for you. So for any reason those 2 units don't agree, it's going to enunciate to you as the pilot and call your attention to it, so hopefully you can determine what's going on. Last thing, it is very flexible in terms of how you mount this box. It says up to 24 different orientations in here. It might be more than that now. They've made it very flexible, and they can calibrate out some amount of pitch and roll offsets and things like that. The GEA-24, again, that's that engine interface box. So that's going to bring in all your thermocouples, your pressure sensors, your trim sensors, flap position, all those types of things on the airplane. they're going to be concentrated through this box and put out on the CAN bus network to be shown on the display. It is designed to be mounted on the cold side of the firewall, but you can put it up close to the engine to minimize those wire runs. And it uses low density connectors like all of our boxes, trying to make these as easy to install and wire as possible. The box does have a dedicated CAN bus interface for things like the Rotax 912IS. So no additional hardware or software required for that Rotax 912IS support. That's included with this box. The GAD29, there's that data concentrator. Pretty straightforward. It's going to take the ARINC 429 between the different devices. It's going to put it out on the CAN bus network. Angle of attack display. So there's a couple things you got to have, but we do support angle of attack. You got to have the GSU-25. So you've kind of got that already just by buying the G3X system. You're most of the way there. Again, that's got pitot, AOA, and static ports on it, and so you have to connect all those up. So you're going to have to wire up a GAP26 and do the pneumatic plumbing, I should say, for the pitot and the AOA ports that are on our probe. Once you do that, you've got everything you need to do the AOA display. You got a couple ways you can display it. First of all, you get the integrated G3X display for free. So where that little indexer shows up right here next to the airspeed tape, that's an option. Or if you want to have it up on the glare shield, you can buy our GI260, which is a nice sunlight readable display. Gets it up in that primary field of view, and is a nice option if that's where you're used to seeing it. It does include visual and audible alerting, and I'm going to go through kind of an example how that works. So first of all, you're going to have to go out and you're going to calibrate this angle of attack pressure for your aircraft. So you're going to have to tell us things like, what's your target approach angle of attack? And that's where that green circle or the green donut's going to show up there in the top image. The minimum visible AOA, the next one down, that's just the point at which the angle of attack indication comes up on the primary flight display. So as long as you, once you increase angle of attack past that point, the little indexer pops up for you. The caution alert AOA, that's that first yellow chevron pointing down. That's where you're going to start to hear audible tones in your ear. So you're going to hear a dit, 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 real slow beeping initially. As you continue to increase your angle of attack to stall warning, you're going to get a dit, 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 dit. So you get an audible tone that increases in frequency. That's going to give you your stall warning awareness even without looking at the little indexer, as well as when you get up to that high angle of attack to where your stall warning point's calibrated, it's going to be flashing at you. So it's a very nice system, works really well. We got a couple different comm radio options, and the GTR 200 and the GTR 20. Again, going back to before, those are the radios that we designed specifically for this market. And the only difference between these two, other than $200 difference, obviously one's got a control head and can be panel mounted. The other one's designed to be completely remote mounted behind the panel. They are 10-watt radios, so they've got pretty good transmit power. They've got a built-in 2-place stereo intercom. They've got advanced auto squelch and 3D audio. So the 3D audio is going to allow things like your active and your standby frequency to be separated out into different ears in your headset, letting you distinguish which one you want to listen to. Also the stereo music input, and you've got auxiliary inputs for alerting. So like we were talking about, that angle of attack audio, you would be able to wire that, all the audio out of the G3X system into this box. It really makes for a complete audio system for a 2-place airplane. If you're only going to have a single comm and you have 2-place, this is a fantastic solution. Completely integrated into the GDU, and we will talk through some examples on that as well. The GSA-28 servo, we call it a smart servo, and there's a number of reasons why we call it smart. I'll get into that. This was another unique design for the experimental market. It's lightweight for a servo, 1.4 pounds, but you can actually get up to 60 inch-pounds of torque out of this thing. So you've got a lot of authority, more than you need to fly most of the aircraft that are going to be in this market. It's a brushless DC motor. What that really means to you as a pilot is a very smooth operation. A lot of people are used to a stepper motor type design, and if you start overriding the servo or anything, you can get really jerky movements in the system with that step motor. but the DC motor doesn't do that, so that makes for a pleasant user experience, a lot easier on the control system. It does have a solenoid engaged clutch, so when that solenoid gate is not engaged, the arm's going to completely freewheel, so you're going to have essentially zero friction in the system. You're not going to have any kind of feedback there when you're just hand flying the airplane. It does have built-in auto trim support, so if you're out flying and you have it engaged, you can wire this servo to your pitch trim, for example, and now it's going to automatically trim out the aircraft for you. So whenever you disconnect the autopilot, say you're descending into the airport environment, it's already trimmed up for you. You don't have to worry about wrestling the airplane around. We support speed scheduled trim, so that's going to do different speeds based on the aircraft speed. If you're at high cruise speed and you touch the trim switch, you don't want to have a big movement in the trim motor, or else you're going to get a big pitch deviation. So we run the trim motor slower when you're up at high speed. And then when you get down to the pattern, and that's when you're making flap configuration changes, power changes, things like that, you want to have more authority on that trim motor, so we run it faster. Here's a quick view into what that unit looks like. As you can see, the solenoid engage clutch over here, that's what's going to completely disengage if you remove power or if you ever hit the autopilot disconnect button. It has a planetary gear system, so that provides multiple gear paths throughout the servo. A lot of safety built into this design. Autopilot control options. So we already hit on the GMC305, that's the dedicated autopilot controller. The GMC305 there at the top, that's the new one that adds the heading and altitude select knobs. But you've also got some controls built right into the touchscreen. So what I call the AFCS touch panel, you can access just by touching the autopilot status bar there at the top of the display. And it brings up this nice interface where you can turn on and off different autopilot modes. Pretty convenient to use. The dedicated controller, again, is very nice because it's always there. It's one less button push, and it provides the added redundancy. So it really is nice to have that there if you have the panel space for it. And we've already covered these. Again, the 307. Okay, quick note on backup power for your system. So we got smaller aircraft. We may not have 2 aircraft batteries or a fully redundant electrical system, but we want some kind of emergency power. Firstly, our system, all of our boxes have 2 aircraft power inputs built into them. So you can wire your primary aircraft power to one, and then you could do something like this TCW backup battery and wire that to the second input on your critical components. So this is kind of a neat product because it has some smarts built into it. It does have an alerting output, so anytime this backup battery goes active and starts providing power, it's going to provide a discrete to your G3X system. So if you wire that discrete up, you can actually get an annunciation that it's running on backup power. It is monitoring the aircraft primary voltage, so that's how it knows when to switch on. When the primary bus voltage gets below a certain threshold, it's going to kick the power on. And you're going to get typical backup times for our legacy system down there at the bottom. You're going to get about 2.4 hours, more than enough time. With the newer system, and this equipment here is enough to keep the primary flight display with the ADAHRs and the engine instruments online. With that bigger display, it pulls a little more juice. You're still going to get over an hour though. Moving on to some ADSB items. First thing we'd like to do is just kind of do a review of the terms so we all know what we're talking about here, and most people are becoming more familiar with ADSB. First, the ADSB out. So that's the mandate. That's what we have to fly in certain airspaces after 2020, and it's January 1 of 2020. Keep that in mind. We don't have until December 31st of 2020. And this is GPS position data that's being broadcast from your aircraft once a second. So you've got a really high frequency output providing high fidelity information to the other aircraft that are ADSB equipped and to the ground stations out there. So ADSB in, that's the benefit that we get here in the US, receiving the subscription-free weather and getting traffic information both from the ground stations and from other aircraft. The 1090 extended squitter, that's the transponder frequency. So This is what would be required if you're flying above flight level 180, but it's also more of a universal frequency because the rest of the world is requiring 1090 extended squitter. 978 is a different frequency. That's the one we pick up that subscription-free weather and the traffic information from the ground systems. I'm sorry, not the traffic, but the subscription-free weather specifically. And that is a US-only frequency right now. Vantage, that's just if you hear that, that's a marketing term for all the Garmin solutions we have available. We cover 5 different markets. We have a large variety of products depending on what you currently have, what your plans are for the aircraft, that sort of thing. Target trend and terminal traffic, we're going to go over those in detail, so I won't talk too much about them there, but those are some of the benefits that we can bring to our display of ADSB traffic on our displays. So for the hardware side, excuse me. For the hardware side, first of all, we have our integrated transponder, the GTX 23ES. That's a remote mount Mode S transponder. It meets the 2020 mandate when you pair it up with an appropriate GPS, and you're going to get 250 watts of transmit power. So that's a pretty long-range solution. Again, that 1090 extended squitter is more of a universal solution. The GDL39R, or any of the GDL39 series, dual frequency ADSB receivers, that's typically what we see people installing with their G3X system. So again, it is a dual frequency, so 978 and 1090 are going to be able to be seen. We don't care what the other aircraft is broadcasting on. This one's designed to be remote mounted. It does have Bluetooth built into it, so now you can hardwire this GDL39 to one of your displays and Bluetooth connect to up to 2 additional devices. So that could be a second G3X touch display, connecting Bluetooth that way, and also could be a compatible smartphone or tablet device running our Garmin Pilot application. And then the GPS 20A, so that's kind of the other piece to it. If you're going with a VFR solution, you're not going to have a GPS, an approach certified GPS in the airplane like a GTN 650 or a 625 or any of those. The GPS 20A provides that compliant position that you need to meet that mandate. And we'll review all that again here. So again, kind of focusing on how this system is working and really want to put an emphasis on why the dual frequency aspect of our ADSB receiver is an important feature. First of all, the characters here, we've got the guy in the middle, that's me. I've got a G3X equipped airplane with my GTX 23ES and GDL39R. So I'm broadcasting on 1090 and I'm receiving on both frequencies. Over here on the right-hand side, I've got a high-flying business jet. He's equipped with 1090 ES, and then a smaller airplane down here equipped with 978 out. I don't care which one of those frequencies they're broadcasting on because I'm dual frequency. We've also got another target over here. Mode C equipped airplanes are not seen by ADSB they're not broadcasting, but they are being pinged by primary surveillance radar. So we can still see that traffic. First of all, there's the air-to-air, so I'm seeing both of those airplanes. Secondly, I get the TISB rebroadcast from the ground station, and that's how I'm going to pick up the Mode C traffic. So the primary surveillance radar relays that through an ADSB ground station there, broadcasts it back up to my airplane, and now I've got a complete picture. If you ever hear somebody talk about ADSB service volume or the hockey puck, that's the 15 nautical mile range, the radius around my aircraft's location, plus or minus 3,500 feet. That's what they're talking about. Okay, some of the features again. So another way to kind of highlight the dual frequency aspect. This is a coverage map for the ADSB ground stations. So again, that TISB rebroadcast of data. Since I'm equipped with a dual frequency ADSB receiver, I'm not as dependent on the ground stations, which is a good thing. The ground station is going to require line of sight to my airplane in order for me to receive it. So as I go from 3,000 feet AGL down to 1,500 feet AGL, down to 500 feet AGL, you can start to see the gaps in coverage open up. So if you can imagine going into the airport environment where you really want to make sure you can see other airplanes, you don't want to be relying on that ADSB ground station for traffic. here's how the display aspect works. So I talked about Garmin target trend. If you can see the green vector coming off the end of this airplane, that trend vector there, that's what we call the trend, the Garmin target trend technology. So if that green line ends up on top of my own ship icon, which is right here in the center of the traffic page, and neither airplane makes any deviation of their course or adjusts their speed or does anything, we're going to have a really close encounter, especially if we're at the same altitude. So it gives you a very good, it gives you good situational awareness to where those other aircraft are at relative to your location. And here's another way I can illustrate it. So we've got two traffic targets. One's on my right side, the other guy on my left is a little bit further away, and they're both traveling parallel to my current direction. This is what we would call an absolute motion display because it has no idea about the relative trend of the other aircraft to my location. If I add into things like wind, that's where the target trend really shines, because now I can see the airplane on the right-hand side is drifting away from my current location. The airplane on the left side is drifting into me. So it really helps you get an idea of who's the real threat. Terminal traffic, if you can see the icon right here under my pointer, and it's kind of hard to pick out there, but that brown coloration is telling you that that aircraft or ground vehicle or whatever is being depicted is currently on the ground at that airport. So that becomes really handy when you're in a congested area to depict between the airplanes that are actually in the air with you versus the ones that are taxiing around on the ground. Okay. Moving on to some G3X touch features, and I know this is a whirlwind of information, but hopefully it gives you guys all a good overview. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to try to talk through just some of the basic controls of the system and how we use it. So first of all, you have to understand up in the upper right-hand corner, there's a split button, and this is a very important thing to understand for the system operation. Right now I'm going to show you what happens when you press that split button. And it does maybe what you would expect. It puts it into a split screen mode. I've got my primary flight display on one side, and I've got a multi-function window on the right-hand side in this case. So now I can go to different pages. You'll see a page navigation bar at the bottom here, and pull up all kinds of different information depending on what I want to see. So that's the first thing. Now you'll notice that upper right-hand corner changes to a full. So if I press that full key, exactly what you'd expect, goes back into a full screen mode. Now I've got my wide synthetic vision display. A couple other things to highlight. So it is a touch screen. One of the ways to know which aspects of the screen you can interact with is that they'll have a little white line around them. So if you see the inset map here and here, the fields for baro setting, the altitude bug up here, the heading bug, the autopilot status bar, the transponder field, the audio field, the frequency fields, and the EIS strip, all of those have a white outline around them, and that's kind of a cue to help you know that those can be interacted using the touchscreen. This makes some pretty cool things. So one of the neat things is I've got the active flight plan on the right-hand side and the moving map on the left-hand side. If I want to jump to the split screen mode and go to that page, I can just tap that box and it takes me directly there. So it makes it real quick and easy. I can change those inset windows to be a traffic map, or I can put it as a video inset or other things, which really makes for those to be a configurable shortcut for the system. Very easy to use. Similarly, if I touch the EIS strip on the left-hand side, it's going to jump me to a more detailed engine page in the split screen mode. So we do have those dedicated knobs and buttons along the bottom, and I'm going to highlight what those do for you. So you're typically always going to have on that left-hand knob, it's going to be a dedicated heading and selected altitude knob. So the smaller knob is going to select your heading, the bigger knob is going to select your altitude. Pretty straightforward. On the right-hand side, this knob's a little bit more page dependent. So in this case, that bigger knob on the outside does my baro setting, but if I went into split screen mode on a moving map, it would probably be my zoom in and out if I spun that knob, and also it can scroll through different pages. So that's more of a multi-function knob, if you will. Okay, the next button's the nearest key. So if you're familiar with any Garmin products, you're probably not going to be surprised what this does. Anytime you want, you hit the nearest key, it's going to take you to the nearest screen on that split screen configuration. So the first airport up there, that's your nearest airport. And then you can see another page navigation bar down here, so you can quickly get to nearest weather, VORs, NDBs, intersections, all kinds of great information. I really love that it's got the quick access to frequencies right here. So now I can pull up a nearest list, tap that frequency field, it goes into my standby frequency. Very quick and easy. It does your frequency decoding. So much going on in the background for you to make it straightforward. The next button, the Direct To key. So that's just going to nominate a Direct To for you. In this particular example, I've already got the Cascade Locks Oregon airport there highlighted. So when I hit that Direct To key, it's going to nominate that airport as my Direct To navigation. Now I can see my bearing, my distance, my course to the airport. I can pull up waypoint information, all kinds of things I can do from here. I can just simply hit here for a Direct To activate. The next one's the menu key. So the biggest thing to keep in mind is that the menu key is context sensitive. So in this configuration right here, I'm going to get a map menu when I press that menu key. So there's my map options. Now I can turn on and off different layers. I can change it from a VFR to an IFR map, turn weather on and off, things like that. I've also got that handy slider bar on the side. So if you want to quickly turn up or down the level of detail you're showing, that's a pretty handy feature. And if you want to fine-tune it, that's when you'd go into the setup map options, and then you can really get down into the details depending on what your preference are. The PFD can be done from that full screen menu, full screen presentation. If you hit the menu key, you get a set of PFD options. So that's where you'd select your CDI source, select your inset windows, your bearing pointers, your timer, things like that. But you also have the option of just tapping the HSI. At any time, if you touch inside that HSI circle, it's going to bring up your PFD options. That's the one I find myself using most frequently. It's easy to access. The main menu, if you hit the menu key twice at any time, that's going to take you into our main menu. So these are going to be less frequently used functions, like setting up your weight and balance is a good example, or setting up a VNAV profile you can access from here, pulling up a flight plan list. And then the last one there, the back key. So pretty intuitive. It's always going to take you one step back if you tap it once. If you press and hold the back key, that'll always take you back to the home screen. So if you get yourself dug down into adjusting a minor detail in one of the menus and you just want to get back to the default page, just press and hold the back key and it'll take you back. In this case, the default's the wide full screen primary flight display like that. The SD card is going to be used there in the middle. It's easy to get in and out of the front of the bezel there, and that's going to be used for your software updates. If you have database updates, it's going to do flight data logging for you, as well as electronic checklists. So you can download a tool from our website, set up your own electronic checklists, plug them into the system. Totally configurable. On the primary flight display, all the systems out there now have synthetic vision, so that's not anything new anymore, but there are some pretty advanced things going on here. We're doing forward-looking terrain awareness, we're doing forward-looking obstacle awareness, so those are pretty handy situational awareness tools. And in this example, you can see where that shading on the primary flight display corresponds with the pop-up terrain warning down in the bottom. You're going to get the terrain warning at the top of the page. And you're also going to get audible alerts. So it's doing a lot to get your attention that you have a potential impact point. Similar alerts for obstacles and traffic. So there's if you can see far off in the distance, you can see a waypoint identifier just showing you some more aspects of the synthetic vision. And that's going to show India X-ray Delta. That's one of our home airports here. And as you get closer into that, you're going to see the runway environment. You're going to see runway end identifiers. You're going to see crossing runways, pretty handy. And it's always good to point out, if you're not familiar already with the flight path marker, This little circle here under my pointer with the ticks on it, that's what we call the flight path marker, and that always shows you the direction of travel of the airplane. So even if you're crossed into the wind and descending, that's always going to show you what your lateral path is, and it's going to show you basically what your glide path is. So if you can hold that on the runway numbers, it's going to bring you right down over there. Makes it really nice. So a great example is if you're flying a long straight-in approach and you don't have any kind of a VASI or anything like that, this can be a pretty handy tool to help you set up a stabilized glide path down at the numbers. Okay, you've landed in the airport environment, and so this is another example of where our system can do things automatically for you. If you're on that map page, it can automatically zoom in on those SafeTaxi diagrams. So now you're going to immediately have awareness of what the different runways are. You're going to have the taxiways identified, the FBOs, different locations on the field. So pretty handy, including the little hotspots that are circled. And then we do have pathways or highway in the sky. The magenta boxes, those are going to correspond to your flight plan and your current selected altitude. Back to the primary flight display. On the traffic there, you can see the yellow circle. Those are going to be displayed in 3 dimensions, so as they get closer to you, they're going to be larger. Lots of places we show traffic. We show it on the moving map too, as well as a dedicated traffic page. If you're transitioning to glass and the traditional 6-pack is what you're more comfortable with, we do have this option to show the more familiar presentation. You can even have synthetic vision turned on behind the 6-pack. Or if you really just want a simpler presentation, the old blue over brown, you can do that as well. On the moving map, we're going to highlight a few different things. The first thing, those green lines you see on the moving map, those are runway end extensions. They even come with a little label on them to tell you what the runway is. Very handy if you're coming into the airport environment. You want to set up, number 1, to make sure that you've got the right runway. Number 2, that it can help you set up your downwind leg base to final. And just a pretty handy reference that maybe a lot of people don't know is in the system. We also have the fuel range rings. So 2 green rings. The inner ring is going to show you range to the reserve fuel. So as long as you have a fuel flow sensor and you remember to set your fuel totalizer at the beginning of the flight, you're automatically going to get these fuel range rings. The inner and the outer circle is going to be your maximum range. So we'll let you configure how much you want for your reserve fuel, 30 or 45 minutes. And it can be really handy if you're on a cross-country flight trying to determine what a good stop might be to make sure you have plenty of fuel in case of an emergency. I'm going to highlight another direct-to entry just to show how easy it is to do basic navigation if you're just doing a cross-country flight to a local airport or whatever. This case, I've highlighted the Portland-Troutdale Airport there at the top of the map. And it shows me also at the bottom, if you can see down here, it shows you the identifier and some information about that waypoint. Now that I've highlighted, all I have to do is hit that direct to key. It nominates Portland-Troutdale, hit direct to activate, and you're off and running. You've got some other neat things you can do from the map. From the menu screen, you can select edit on map. And now you can rubber band around airspace, weather, maybe you want to go to a scenic spot. Just drag your current route over there and drop it where you want to go, and it's going to either create a user waypoint or use an existing database waypoint if you drop it on one, and insert that into your flight plan. The other thing you can do, hard to demonstrate on a presentation, but you can add additional waypoints to the end of your flight plan simply by touching the screen. You can connect the dots, hit save, it adds them to the end. Pretty slick. There's the graphical weather overlay. We do animated weather too, so it's going to take the last, I think it's maybe 9 updates, and it's going to animate those for you so you can see the trend. And there is a SiriusXM or that ADSB weather option. We already hit SafeTaxi. Okay, Autopilot functions. ESPX. So this is a safety feature that we developed for the certified market. We're able to bring it over into the technology we have in the experimental Autopilot. In this example, well, let me hit a few items first. This is a standard feature. If you buy the Garmin Autopilot servos, This is a standard feature. You just have to set it up. It works when the autopilot's not engaged. So in this example, the pilot was hand flying the airplane and he got distracted or fell asleep or something, and the nose dropped off and he rolled to the side. You can see those yellow chevrons pointing up, and hopefully you can see those little yellow indicators, those hash marks on the roll bar, the roll indicator there. That's telling you that ESP is engaged, the autopilot, and it's actually trying to guide you back to straight and level. It just nudges you. So here's what that looks like in a different graphic. You can see over here, let's pretend this is your roll limit that you set up for your electronic stability protection. If you exceed that limit, the autopilot kicks on and tries to nudge you back to straight and level. If you continue to roll the airplane over, it continues to gradually increase the force, again, trying to nudge you back. It's very smooth. If nobody told you what was going on, you'd probably not really understand it. It's very natural feeling. Sort of augmented or augmented stability. Pitch, roll, and airspeed base. So it's monitoring all those parameters for you. If you get outside any of the configured limits, and they are user selectable within certain range, so you can select pitch, roll, and airspeed limits. It's going to disable below 200 feet AGL, so you don't have electronic stability engaged when you get down there and you're doing your landing flare. If you continue to fight electronic stability protection for more than 15 seconds, and you configure the auto level mode function on, it'll engage automatically and bring the airplane back to straight and level. So it could be something where the pilot becomes incapacitated, automatic level mode kicks on after no response, brings the airplane back to straight and level, potentially gives him a chance to wake up. Very flexible in configuration. It can default on or default off. You can even install a little switch to turn it on and off. We know these are sport aircraft and that we're all going to go out and play, so you can get electronic stability out of your way if you want it. Okay, another feature, the best airport bearing pointer. So I'm going to try to speed up because I want to leave time for questions, but there's a lot of material to cover. The best airport bearing pointer is automatically running in the background, selecting an airport. So we're talking about an emergency engine out scenario here. If you're not paying attention and you haven't looked for a spot and the engine dies, this gives you a nominated airport that you can consider. So what that does is it looks at the airplane's glide range, and we draw a glide range ring, and I'm pointing to that little cyan ring around there. That's taken into account the aircraft altitude, your best glide speed that you input into the system, and your vertical speed at that best glide speed. It takes into account the wind conditions, all those other factors, and draws a ring. So it's looking at all the airports within that ring. It's got all those airports are in the database, and trying to automatically select for you which is the best one. So here's my example. Right now, if you can see where the airplane icon is located here, it's pretty close to some little restricted airports, probably grass strips, maybe 1,500 feet or less, and a couple other larger airports. But it automatically is selecting this one here, India X-ray Delta, and the reason is it's already oriented with the wind direction that you want to land. The wind's out of the north. It's within your glide range. It's over 7,000 feet long. So there's an algorithm going on the back to help select. So if you train yourself to do an emergency procedure, you could say, let's activate a direct to. Go to the nearest airports tab right there. Now you're going to see India X-ray Delta nominated as that best glide airport. Activate your direct to, set your autopilot to fly your best glide airspeed, and now your hands are freed up to troubleshoot the aircraft. You can check for fuel, check for fire, do all the things you need to do to hopefully get that engine started again. Connects capability, so all of our displays have built-in wireless capabilities. That's going to allow you to connect to things like our Garmin Pilot application. You've got the ability to do G3X touch and GTN flight plan transfers. So that's what we're showing right up here. The little connects icon brings up a window to let you send to or get information from the panel. Here's an example of what happens when you import it into the G3X system. So there you see it says flight plan received. It gives you a preview of the flight plan. And now do you want to ignore that? Do you want to store it to your flight plan catalog? Or do you want to go ahead and activate it, make that your active flight plan? we're going to send G3X Touch position information off to the Garmin Pilot application. So now your charts are geo-referenced and your maps geo-referenced using the G3X higher quality GPS. You're going to get AHRS data streaming, so that's going to feed your synthetic vision on that portable device. And the GDL39, again, that has Bluetooth, so it's going to send over ADSB traffic and weather information to the Garmin Pilot application. The Verb Action Camera, I told you I was going to show you some examples. So here's where we got the video connected to the display, and now I've got some nice little icons that let me start and stop the video recording and even take still photos. So in terms of integration, there's a long list of things that we do really well. We've got such a breadth product line. We've been integrating more and more with all the comm products that we sell. We're integrating the control of the comm standby and active frequencies from the G3X Touch display. We've got that great fast find function, so you can quickly tune the standby doing a database lookup, and doesn't require you to enter all those numbers. The transponder control. And like I said, all the comm radios that we're currently selling, the GTR, the GNC, the GTN, all those can be integrated into the G3X display. We integrate with our traffic system, the GTS 800, and the list goes on. So we're just continuing to make more of products integrate with the G3X, making it a more complete flight deck system. I'll run through some quick pricing examples because I always get questions from customers about competitive pricing. Unfortunately, we have a pretty big perception that Garmin's more expensive. I'd like to think that's just because the quality of the units are better, and that's the reason. But just to give you an idea, a competitive comparison, and I'm not going to name names here, but this is what's included: the large touchscreen display, moving map with GPS navigation, 4-cylinder engine monitoring, 25 kHz comm, 2-place stereo intercom, the transponder, the video input, the wireless capability, vertical power integration if you're using the electronic circuit breakers, all that's included, and here's the comparison price. So the Garmin equipment actually comes out a little bit cheaper there. And here's another one I've added in. Now it's 2-screen system. It's an ADSB receiver, dual axis autopilot with the dedicated control head, and here's where that equipment pricing falls. And then last, this is kind of a complete VFR installation. It pulls in that GPS 20A for your ADSB compliance, and the closest competitor just a little bit more. Again, price is pretty neutral in this market, so we like to highlight that. The database side is another one. We do have some really great deals for G3X databases. The $50 a year subscription gets you nav data, terrain, obstacles, and those great SafeTaxi diagrams. And for just $100 more a year, you can add our Garmin geo-referenced flight charts, those approach plates, VFR paper charts, IFR high and low en route charts, so a lot of value packed into there. We also have our ongoing GTN 625 promotion. So $54.95 when you purchase with any G3X system. That's an absolutely outstanding deal. It not only gets you the IFR approach capability, but it also acts as your ADSB compliant position source. So you wouldn't need something like the GPS 20A if you went with a GTN 625. So that's an ongoing deal we've been running there. And that was it. Hopefully I didn't run through too much information too quickly, and I guess I'll turn it back over to Eric now. Maybe he can feed some questions.
Brian, thanks a lot of good information. I guess let's start with what may not be that simple of a question to answer, but nevertheless, one of the first questions that came through tonight was whether you could further explain or help clarify what type of traffic information is coming through your portable GDL39.
Yeah, so the traffic information that's coming through the GDL39, and I'll just say more broadly that any of the GDL39 series, they're all fundamentally the same. They're going to be receiving the air-to-air ADSB traffic. So any other aircraft that's equipped with ADSB out equipment, it's going to be seeing those traffic targets. The GDL39 also is able to receive the TISB rebroadcast from the ground station. So that's where the primary surveillance radar, and the ADSB system are bringing all that traffic and broadcasting it up to the airplane. So all those different sources the GDL39 can bring on board and display.
Brian, thanks for that. We'll give a couple minutes for any other questions that any of the attendees may wish to present. Brian, one next question that came in here, will the SL30 comm radio interface with the G3X?
Yeah, great question. So the SL30, it will integrate with the G3X. It won't integrate quite to the same level of the current comms that we're selling. So you'll still be able to see the active and the standby frequencies. You'll still be able to tap the standby frequency on the G3X Touch and use those, tuning the frequency manually or using the database lookup features. You'll still get all that great capability. The biggest thing that you're missing is the ability to flip the active and the standby with the SL30. So you will have to reach over to the standby or reach over to the SL30 control head when you want to flip-flop the standby and the active. But otherwise, it's still pretty well integrated into the display.
Okay, another question is if you had some advice on the best type of information to be displaying on the G3X, like what type of data, what configuration, overlays, etc.
Yeah, so I think with just the widescreen presentation that I showed there at the beginning, you've got those inset maps, so you've really got the ability to show a lot of information, even with the wide primary flight display, and it really depends on phase of flight. So that's a tough question to answer, to give a short answer on, and a lot of it is personal preference. The reason that some people install 3 or 4 of these displays is they like to have a big screen showing traffic on one, a map on the other, maybe the video inset for fun on another one. But yeah, tough question to answer. You can get a lot of information packed into just that screen that I'm showing there on the final slide.
Brian, what kind of attendee would like to know what kind of technical support is available from Garmin if they're having issues with their system? How would they go about getting technical support?
Yeah, great question. We do have a full team of product support people online, and they can call in if they prefer. We do have a dedicated line that goes through to some folks that are really familiar with the experimental product line, that are really good at helping out with troubleshooting. We also have our G3expert@garmin.com email address, so if you want to shoot a quick email, that comes to myself, the rest of the experimental team on the engineering side, on the product support side. That's probably the best way to communicate with us quickly. And again, that's G3expert@garmin.com.
Brian, how about any additional training material for people that want to get better up to speed with the G3X? Are there training materials that are available out there?
The training materials right now, we do have a pilot's guide that's readily available online. We are going to a lot of shows throughout the year to try to get the product in front of people, but training classes have not been created just yet, and stay tuned for that. Hopefully we'll be able to work on some more training material, as well as we're working on some video tutorials and examples that we'll be posting on our website. So,
Brian, one last question as we kind of reach our hour allotted time, but the final question being, do you have an idea, or is there some standard manner in which updates to the system are released? Like, once someone has the G3X configuration or installation, how often would you expect updates from Garmin?
Yeah, so in terms of software updates, they're fairly regular. I'd say once a month or once every other month there'll typically be a software release. If you can go to our website and download the software for free, and you can see the revision history. You'll see that they've just continued to crank out new awesome features. Just before Sun and Fun this year, we introduced the glide range ring and the electronic stability protection that I talked about, and they just continue to come up with new things. So yeah, I would say once a month or once every other month, something along those lines. And you just download it to your SD card, pop it in the display. It's pretty straightforward to do the software update. And I should mention along those lines in terms of database updates, you do go to our flygarmin.com website. All of your databases can be managed through that one portal. So you select which databases you want, download them to the SD card, pop them in. Makes it pretty quick and easy.
Brian, thanks a lot. With that, I'll pass along also that a lot of great feedback from all the attendees tonight on the presentation. So thanks so much for all this information. As a reminder to everyone on the broadcast, we did record the entire presentation, and we will make this available in its entirety in the Sporty's webinar archives, which will be available at sportys.com/webinars. So please check back in the next couple of days to take a look for that recording. And also, while you're there, also take a look at some of the upcoming presentations that we have available from Sporty's, the next of which is taking place just next week on Thursday the 20th, and that's going to be on a related topic, ADSB equipping for the 2020 mandate. So with that, Brian Hoopy, thanks so much for joining us. For Brian, my name's Eric Radkitz.